Cool. So that's how we create a verification landing page. And the next thing that we're going to want to do here is actually create a route that this page can send a request to. Okay, so what that's going to look like here, we're going to go back into our server. Okay, I'm just going to close all these files for now to prevent us from getting too cluttered. And we're going to open up our backend, go into source and routes, and we're going to create a new route, which we'll call verify email route.js. And here's what this route's going to look like. We're going to say export const verify email route equals, and the path for this one we already decided is going to be /email verification. Not the most restful path, to be honest, but whatever, it'll work for now. And the method here is going to be put. Now, as far as middleware, we don't need any middleware, so we can just leave that property off completely. But we are going to need a handler, and this handler is, of course, going to be async. We're going to have request and response. And inside here, we're going to start off by getting the verification code from the request body. So we'll say const verification code equals request.body. Awesome. So we now have our verification code. So what we need to do is take a look at this verification code to see if it matches the verification code that we inserted into the database, right? So we're going to need to essentially load that user out of the database. Okay, I'm just going to draw a little graphic for that here. We're going to need to load that user out of the database, take a look at their verification code, see if it matches, and if it does, great, we're going to send back just a 200 status code. If it doesn't, that's not so great, we're going to send back some kind of error code. And one last thing, obviously, is that we're going to mark the user's email as verified in Firebase auth. So remember how we set the user to email verified false when we first created the user. Okay, right up here we said email verified false. We're going to have to update that property to email verified true so that we can, so that the user can actually access the rest of the data in our application. So what that's going to look like now, we're going to first start off by loading the user. And basically, we're just going to load them by the verification code. If there is a user with that verification code, great, they're verified. If there isn't, then the verification code is a fake or it's old. So let's import our users DB up here. We're going to say import users DB from ... /db. And then down here, we're going to say const user equals await users DB. Oops, users DB, there we go. Find one, and we're going to look for the user with that verification code. And that's pretty much the only query we need to make to our database at this point. So all we need to do now is check to see if that user does in fact exist, right? If there is a user with that verification code. And for that, we're going to say if not user, right? So in other words, if a user doesn't exist, then what we're going to do is simply say return response.sendStatus, and I guess let's send back a 404 since that user wasn't found with that verification code. That seems to make sense to me anyway. Now, on the other hand, if that user does exist, what we're going to do is we're going to simply respond by saying response.sendStatus 200. So we'll say response.sendStatus 200, and that will tell the page that we just created that everything went well and that it should display the success message. Now, in between here and there, we're going to need to update our user in Firebase auth to show that their email is now verified. Now, the way that that's going to work is we're going to need the user's ID and we're going to need Firebase auth. So first of all, we can get Firebase admin rather by saying import all as admin from Firebase admin. And then down here, we're going to say await admin.auth. And the function that we're looking for here is the update user function. So we're going to say update user, and this allows us to update the user's information in Firebase auth, much like we would update it in our own Mongo database, right? So we're going to say admin.auth.update user, and what we're going to do here is update the user's email verified property to true. Okay, that's all we really needed to do there, and that should about do it. Oh, one thing we have to do, though, is actually pass the user's ID into here so that Firebase auth knows which user we're trying to verify the email of. So to do that, we're just going to pass in the user's ID, and we can get that from the user we loaded from MongoDB. So we'll just say user.id, and that should take care of marking the user's email as verified. So let's give this a try now. What we're going to do is go back to the email that I received from myself. Okay, so here that is. And we're going to click on this link, and it looks like something didn't go quite right. So let's check our server and see if we got an error of some kind. No, it looks like we didn't get an error. So maybe it's something with our page. Let's open up our verification landing page again. And let's print out an error to see if one is occurring here, because some sort of error must be occurring in order for this thing to be happening here. So I'm going to just log out E. And now, just to make sure everything is running fine, it looks like it is. Let's try this thing again. We're just going to hit refresh. And let's open up our console and see what's going on in here. So it looks like we got failed to load resource. The server responded with a status of 404. Okay, so let's go to our network tab and try this one more time. I'm going to hit refresh. And let's take a look at what's being sent along to this email verification endpoint. So we said cannot put email verification on our server. That's just because we never actually exported this verify email route from the index file in our routes folder. Okay, so that is the one downside of doing things this way, is you can forget things like that if you're forgetful like me. So let's try this again. In fact, let's reorganize this a little bit. It should be unshare note, should be right under share note route in my mind anyway. And underneath the create user route, we're going to say import verify email route. Oops, is that in middleware? I guess I did put that in middleware. That's weird. All right, let's move that to routes. And there we go. That import should be valid now. And let's just add this to the routes array. We're going to say verify email route. And there we go. So let's try this one more time. We're going to go back here. We're going to refresh our page. And yay, we got a success message finally. So that is basically the email verification route. The next thing we're going to want to do, of course, is actually protect all of our routes and the rest of our application so that the user can't actually log in before it's verified. I'll talk about that more later, but for now, I hope this has been informative, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.